I had spent my whole life putting others first, but for once, I decided to do something for me, something just for me. When I booked that trip for my 65th birthday, I never imagined it would set off such a storm at home. My husband called it nonsense, and my daughter begged me not to cause trouble. But I wasn't asking for permission anymore. I was reclaiming my life. It all started on my 65th birthday. As I watched the sun rise through the kitchen window, I made a decision that would change everything. For years, I had lived for my family, cooking, cleaning, taking care of everyone else's needs. But on this milestone, I thought, why not do something just for me? I signed up for a senior tour group to take a short trip, something I'd always dreamed of. A visit to the National Mall, a chance to see the Lincoln Memorial, to feel the weight of history in person. It had been a secret wish of mine for so long, but I never thought I'd actually make it happen. That is, until now. When my husband, Jack, found out, the reaction was immediate and harsh. He slammed his fork on the dining table, the metal clattering like thunder in the quiet room. "You're too old for this nonsense," he snapped, his voice cold and dismissive, like I was just a child making foolish decisions. His words stung, but I didn't flinch. I had spent too many years keeping my thoughts and desires hidden, swallowed up by my responsibilities as a wife and mother. It was time for me to take control. And then there was my daughter, Sarah. She frowned at me, her voice laced with a tone of disapproval. "Mom, if you go, who's going to pick up Emma and Lily from school?" It was the same old line, the same old guilt trip. I looked at them both, feeling like I was on trial for wanting something as simple as a trip. My only crime was that I wanted something for myself, something that didn't revolve around them. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I didn't want to be just Jack's wife or Sarah's mom anymore. I didn't want to be grandma to Emma and Lily either. I just wanted to be me. That night, I stayed up late, preparing dinner for my family, a meal I knew they'd appreciate. I made Jack's favorite creamy chicken soup, roasted rosemary ribs for Sarah, and blueberry muffins and caramel pudding for the girls. But when I returned to the table after taking a quick phone call, my plate, my special dinner was gone, every last bite. Sarah looked at me awkwardly, and Jack, annoyed, demanded I serve him more food. The frustration welled up inside me, but I swallowed it down. It wasn't just about the food. It was about my life, my choices, and how little respect they seemed to have for either. I had given so much of myself to them, and yet they couldn't even let me have this one small thing for myself. It was then I realized I couldn't keep waiting for their approval, their permission. If I didn't do it now, I might never do it. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen, grabbed my passport, packed a small bag, and left. I didn't even tell Jack or Sarah. I was done being the background player in my own life. It was my turn, and I was going to live it for me. It wasn't until my 65th birthday that I truly realized how little I had lived for myself. For years, I had been trapped in a cycle of fulfilling everyone else's needs, my husband's, my daughter's, my grandchildren's, but never my own. It had been so long since I'd thought about what I wanted that the idea of doing something just for me felt almost foreign. But this birthday would be different. I was going to give myself a gift, a small one, that I knew would make me happy. I was going to take a trip. I had dreamed of visiting Washington, D.C., for years. The thought of standing before the Lincoln Memorial, gazing across the National Mall, and feeling the weight of history made my heart race. It wasn't something I had ever shared with my family, mostly because I knew they wouldn't understand. They would see it as an unnecessary expense or an impractical wish. But this time, I wasn't asking for permission. I signed up for a senior tour group that promised a short getaway to D.C., and it was affordable, only $500 for 2 nights, with meals and lodging included. To me, it was the perfect gift, a chance to see something beautiful, something I had always wanted to experience. When I told my husband, James, about the trip, his reaction was immediate and harsh. He didn't even try to hide his disdain. He slammed his fork onto the table, the metal clattering against the wood with a sharp clang that echoed in the quiet of the dining room. "You're too old for this nonsense," he snapped, his voice low and cold. I stood frozen for a moment, caught off guard by his words. I had hoped for support, or at the very least, understanding, but instead, I was met with scorn. "You should be spending your time here with us, not running off to some tourist trap. This isn't for someone your age." His words stung more than I cared to admit, but I refused to let them break me. I had spent so many years trying to meet his expectations, running the household, taking care of the kids, and doing everything he wanted. Why was it so wrong for me to want a few days for myself? I had never asked for much, just a little freedom, a moment to breathe outside of my responsibilities. Then my daughter, Lucy, joined in. Her frown deepened as she looked at me, and her tone was laced with disapproval. "Mom, if you really go, who's going to pick up Emma from school? And what about Lily's piano lessons? You can't just leave us like this. We need you here." It was always the same with her. She had her life, and I was expected to be there whenever she needed me. But the moment I needed something just for me, I was met with guilt. I wasn't a person with desires or dreams. I was just the caregiver, the helper, the one who sacrificed. And that was how they saw me. I sat there, feeling smaller and smaller. My only crime was wanting to take a trip. I wasn't asking them to join me, wasn't asking them to change their lives. I just wanted a small adventure, to explore a place I had only seen in pictures, to feel like a person again, not just a background fixture in their lives. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I had spent so many years living for everyone else, but it was time to live for me. I was 65 years old, and if I didn't do this now, I might never get the chance. The next morning, I decided to prepare a big family dinner. It had been a while since I made a meal like this, and I wanted to show them that I could still take care of them while also doing something for myself. I made James's favorite creamy chicken soup. For Lucy, I roasted rosemary ribs, just the way she liked them. For the girls, I baked fresh blueberry muffins and caramel pudding, and for myself, I made garlic butter baked crab, something I'd been craving for months. I put my heart into that meal, hoping that they would appreciate the effort, that maybe they would see me in a different light. But when I returned to the table after stepping out to take a phone call, my plate was gone. Not just the crab, but everything. The plate was clean, as if it had never been there at all. The sight of it took me by surprise. I stood there for a moment, scanning the table, unable to understand what had just happened. "Mom," Lucy said awkwardly. "The call took longer than we thought. Come sit down, eat something." I sat down quietly, trying to mask the hurt I felt. James, already annoyed, grumbled, "Who the hell was calling you for that long? And while you're at it, pass me the cornbread." He pushed his empty plate toward me. I picked it up, feeling the weight of his disapproval pressing down on me. I didn't even bother explaining the call. It had been a friend from the senior center, calling to wish me a happy birthday and talk about the trip. Nothing to get upset about. But James didn't care about that. I tried to laugh it off, but my patience was running thin. The next words that came out of my mouth felt like they had been building up for years. The trip to D.C., I said softly. I've already signed up. I'm going. The room fell silent for a moment. Lucy's face tightened, and James's expression darkened. You're really going to Washington, he asked, his voice dripping with disbelief. I nodded, not backing down this time. Well, I think that's a waste of money, he muttered, his voice cold and dismissive. You're too old for this. You should be spending time with your family, not running off to a place that doesn't even matter. His words hit me like a slap, but I didn't let them show. Lucy added, Mom, please, don't cause trouble. You're not even thinking about what this will do to the family. Who's going to pick up the girls from school? Who's going to help with their activities? The guilt trip was in full force, but this time I wasn't going to fall for it. I stood my ground. I had already made up my mind. I didn't want to be just James's wife or Lucy's mom or grandma to Emma and Lily. I wanted to be Iris, just Iris. I was tired of waiting for permission to live. I was 65 years old. I had spent my entire life taking care of everyone else, and it was time for me to do something for myself. That night, I packed my bags in silence, careful not to wake anyone. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had made my choice. I would go on that trip, and I would return a different person, someone who finally knew her worth, someone who finally took control of her own life. The next morning, I left the house without a word. The trip was my gift to myself, the start of something new. A journey to rediscover who I was, beyond the roles I had played for so many years. This was my time, and nothing, not even James's anger or Lucy's guilt, would take it from me. I had spent so many years living for others. First, there was James, my husband. Then, there was Lucy, my daughter, and after her, there were Emma and Lily, my granddaughters. I had poured my heart and soul into their lives, taking care of their needs, making sure everything was in place. I had raised my children, fed my husband, cleaned the house, and made sure everything ran smoothly. But somewhere along the way, I had forgotten about me. Somewhere in the midst of all the caring and sacrifices, I had lost myself. It wasn't until my 65th birthday that I realized just how much of myself I had left behind that morning as I sipped my tea and looked out at the quiet morning sky. I made a decision. I was going to give myself a gift, a trip. For years, I had dreamed of seeing Washington, D.C., standing before the Lincoln Memorial, feeling the weight of history in the air. It wasn't just a tourist stop for me. It was something more. I had longed to be in a place that had so much meaning, a place where I could feel something bigger than myself, something I could finally take pride in. But, of course, I had never shared this dream with anyone. I knew how it would be received. My family would find it unnecessary. They'd think I was too old, too tired, too practical to enjoy something like that. But I wasn't going to ask for their permission. I wasn't going to wait for their approval. This year, for my birthday, I was going to take that trip. I signed up for a senior tour group that offered an affordable getaway to DXC. It was only $500 3 days, 2 nights, with lodging and meals included. I thought that was a reasonable price to pay for something that would make me feel alive again. When I told James, though, he didn't share my excitement. He didn't even try to understand. He slammed his fork down on the table during dinner, the sound sharp and jarring. "You're too old for this nonsense," he said, his voice cold and cutting, as if I were a child asking for a toy. "Why don't you just stay here where you belong? You don't need to go running around the country at your age." I stared at him, trying not to let his words hurt me. I had spent so many years trying to please him, trying to keep our family together. But in that moment, I realized something. I didn't need his approval anymore. I didn't need anyone's approval. Lucy's response was no better. She frowned at me, a look of concern mixed with judgment in her eyes. "Mom, if you go, who's going to take care of Emma and Lily? I don't have time to handle everything. You know how chaotic things are with work and the kids." It wasn't the first time I had heard this from her. Over the years, she had relied on me for everything: babysitting, housework, cooking, and when I needed something in return, it was never enough. "I'll manage," she would say, "or I'll figure it out." But the truth was, she never really wanted to make space for me, and I was always there, silently waiting in the background. In that moment, I felt like I was on trial. I wasn't just asking for a trip. I was asking for the chance to live my own life, to exist outside of my roles as wife, mother, and grandmother. I wasn't asking for much, just a few days to breathe, to see something I had always dreamed of. But it was clear no one saw me as a person outside of those roles. I was just the helper, the caretaker, the one who always gave and never asked for anything in return. I looked at them both and felt something inside me shift. I was done waiting for their approval. I was done sacrificing my dreams for others. I was 65 years old, and if I didn't do this now, I never would. That night, I prepared a big dinner for my family. I made all of their favorites: creamy chicken soup for James, rosemary roasted ribs for Lucy, and blueberry muffins and caramel pudding for Emma and Lily. And for myself, I made garlic butter baked crab, something I had been craving for ages. It was a meal that had taken me hours to prepare, and I did it with love. But when I went to sit down with them, after stepping out for a quick phone call, my plate was gone, every last bite. I stood there, looking at the empty plate, unable to understand what had happened. Lucy looked up awkwardly, and James didn't even seem to notice. "Come sit down, Mom," Lucy said, her voice stiff. "You're not going to eat." I sat down, my stomach sinking. There was nothing left for me, and I wasn't sure if that hurt more than James's earlier words or Lucy's constant need for me to do everything. "Who was on the phone for so long?" James asked, his voice already irritated. "And pass me the cornbread." I didn't respond right away. I wasn't in the mood for more of his complaints. "It was Nora," I said quietly. She was wishing me a happy birthday. At the mention of Nora's name, I couldn't help but smile a little. Nora was one of the few people who had ever truly listened to me. She had been the one to encourage me to take that trip, to do something for myself. And yet, I could already feel the weight of guilt creeping up on me as I thought about James's response. "You know," I continued, trying to steer the conversation away from the tension in the room. "Nora and I are planning to join a travel group. It's a short getaway to see the Lincoln Memorial." James didn't even look up. "Waste of money," he muttered. "You don't need to go. It's a waste of your time and our money." But I wasn't listening anymore. I had made my decision. The more he spoke, the clearer it became to me that nothing would ever change unless I changed it myself. I had spent my whole life bending over backward to please them, and all I had received in return were criticism and disrespect. It was time to start living for me. I didn't back down. "I'm going," I said firmly. The room fell silent. Lucy's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but I could see the relief in them too. She had always wanted me to be more assertive, to stand up for myself, but she had never been able to understand how deeply ingrained my role as caretaker was. Now, I could see her struggling with it. For the first time, she was confronted with the idea that I was no longer willing to be the person who quietly took care of everything while they lived their own lives. I didn't wait for their approval. That night, I packed my bags in silence. The next morning, without telling anyone, I left for the trip. I was done waiting. I was done living for everyone else. This was my time to breathe, to be Iris again. Not James's wife, not Lucy's mom, just Iris. As I boarded the bus to Washington, I felt a sense of freedom wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living my own life, making my own choices. The weight of the past began to lift, and I realized that it was never too late to start over. I was 65, and yet I had just begun to live for myself. After years of feeling invisible, I had finally decided to step into the light. It had taken me a long time to realize just how much I had been holding myself back, waiting for validation, for permission. I had spent decades catering to my family's every need, my husband's, my daughter's, my grandchildren's. I was the foundation, the caretaker, the silent force that made everything run smoothly. But in the process, I had lost myself, and for the first time in a long while, I was tired of it. It all started when I turned 65. The milestone that should have been a moment of celebration instead became another reminder of all the things I had put off. I had dreamed of traveling, of seeing new places, experiencing the world outside the walls of our home. Washington, D.C., had always been on my list: the Lincoln Memorial, the National Mall, the monuments to history that shaped this country. But like so many of my dreams, it was something I put aside for more important things: family, responsibilities, the endless cycle of day-to-day life. But not this time. This time, I made a decision. I was going to take a trip for myself. I signed up for a senior tour group, 3 days, 2 nights, all inclusive, at a price I could afford. $500, a small amount for a memory that would last a lifetime. It was a simple trip, but it was mine. It was for me. When I told James, my husband, about the trip, I didn't expect him to understand, but I hoped for a little support. Instead, he slammed his fork onto the table, the sound sharp and cold, as if I had made some grave mistake. "You're too old for this nonsense," he said, his voice harsh. "What do you think you're going to do? Run around like some tourist?" I had spent years trying to meet his expectations, never questioning his authority. But that moment, I knew I had to break free. I wasn't asking for permission anymore. I was doing this for me. Lucy, my daughter, wasn't any better. She frowned as I told her about the trip, her concern mixed with a hint of disapproval. "Mom, if you go, who's going to pick up the girls from school? You can't just leave us to deal with everything. Don't you think about how this will affect us?" It was always the same. My life had been about everyone else's needs, about keeping everything together, holding things up. But no one ever asked what I needed. No one had ever cared to see me as more than the helper, the caretaker. I looked at Lucy and James, both of them so entrenched in their own lives. And I realized something I had known for years. They didn't see me, Not truly. They saw a function, a role I played in their lives. I wasn't a person with my own desires or dreams. I was just their mom, their wife, the one who made everything work behind the scenes. In that moment, something inside me shifted. I had spent my whole life fulfilling everyone else's needs, making sure they were happy. But now, I was done. I was 65 years old. I wasn't going to wait for permission to live my own life any longer. I was going on that trip. I was going to see D.C. and stand before the Lincoln Memorial. I was going to be Iris again, not just someone's wife or mother. That night, I went to the kitchen and made a big dinner. I cooked all their favorite foods, creamy chicken soup for James, rosemary ribs for Lucy, fresh blueberry muffins, and caramel pudding for Emma and Lily. I poured my love into that meal, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they would appreciate it. But when I stepped away for a few minutes to take a phone call, my dinner was gone, every single bite. My plate was completely clean, not a trace of the food left. I stood there in shock, looking at the empty plate, feeling like a fool. Mom, you were on the phone for so long, Lucy said awkwardly, not meeting my eyes. Come on, sit down, eat something. I sat back down, trying not to let the hurt show. James, already irritated, pushed his empty plate toward me. Who the hell was calling you for that long and pass me the cornbread? He demanded. The bitterness in his voice stung, but I didn't say anything. I just picked up his plate and went to the kitchen. It was Nora. I said quietly. She was calling to wish me a happy birthday. Nora was the only one who seemed to understand me anymore. She had always encouraged me to do something for myself, to stop living solely for others. But my family, they just didn't get it. Nora suggested we join a travel group together. I continued, a trip to D.C. to see the Lincoln Memorial. She thought it'd be fun. James didn't even look up. Waste of money, he muttered. You don't need to be going off to some tourist trap. His words were a slap in the face, but I wasn't going to let them silence me. I had already made my decision. I'm going, I said firmly. James rolled his eyes and scoffed, but I didn't care anymore. I was done living for them. This was my life too, and I had spent far too long putting my dreams on hold for the sake of others. I didn't want to be just James's wife, or just Lucy's mom, or just grandma to Emma and Lily. I wanted to be Iris again. The next morning, I woke up early, packed my bags in silence, and left. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't ask for anyone's approval. I was done seeking permission to live. As I boarded the tour bus, I felt a wave of relief wash over me. I was free. For the first time in years, I wasn't living for someone else's expectations. I was living for me. The trip itself wasn't extravagant, just a few days, a few nights, but it felt like an act of rebellion. For the first time in my life, I was choosing myself over the needs of others. The sights in D.C. were everything I had imagined. The Lincoln Memorial was towering and majestic. I stood there for hours, taking in the significance of the place, feeling the weight of history. I thought about all the years I had spent trying to live up to other people's expectations, and I realized that it was never going to be enough. I had to live for myself. When I returned home, I was a different person. I felt lighter, more confident, more at peace. But the family didn't take it well. James was furious. He didn't understand why I had gone, why I had made that decision without consulting him first. But I didn't care anymore. I was no longer the person who kept quiet and went along with things just to keep the peace. That night, as I unpacked my bags, I knew something had changed. I had spent years bending over backward for my family, but now I was choosing to live for myself. It wasn't just about the trip. It was about reclaiming my life. And in that moment, I promised myself I would never go back to the way things were. From then on, I lived my life on my own terms. I started to do things I had always wanted to do, whether it was singing at the local bar or traveling to places I had dreamed of. I realized that it was never too late to start over. I didn't need their approval anymore. I was finally living for me. For years, I had been nothing but a background figure in my own life, always the wife, always the mother, and always the caretaker. It wasn't that I resented these roles, but somewhere along the way, I had forgotten who I was outside of them. I had been so focused on meeting the needs of my family that I never stopped to ask myself what I truly wanted. That all changed when I turned 65. On my birthday, I decided that I would give myself something I had always dreamed of: a trip. It wasn't anything extravagant, just a short getaway to Washington, D.C., something I had always wanted to do, but never had the chance. I wasn't asking anyone for permission. This was something for me, and I wasn't going to let anyone talk me out of it. When I told my husband, Harold, he didn't take it well. He immediately dismissed my plans with a harsh remark. "You're too old for this nonsense," he said, his voice cold, as if I were being ridiculous for wanting to go on a trip at my age. He didn't understand. He never had. My daughter, Claire, wasn't any better. She frowned at me, her disapproval clear. "Mom, if you go, who's going to take care of the kids? You're the one who always picks them up from school and helps with their homework. You can't just leave us like this." The guilt trip was as familiar as it was draining. It was always the same with Claire. She needed me. And when I had my own needs, they were always secondary. But that was it, wasn't it? I had spent my entire life putting everyone else first. My husband, my children, my grandchildren, they all took priority. And while I loved them, I couldn't help but wonder when it would be my turn. When would I be allowed to live for myself, to do something just because I wanted to? I didn't want to wait any longer. At 65, I felt like time was running out. If I didn't take control now, I never would. I stood my ground. "I'm going," I said firmly. "This trip is for me. I've waited long enough." Harold scoffed, dismissing my words. "You'll regret it," he muttered. "You're too old to be running around like that. What's next? A skydiving trip." He laughed bitterly, but his words stung. I realized then that he didn't see me for who I was. He only saw the woman who had always been there, quietly doing her part without complaint. But I wasn't just that. I was more than that. That night, I prepared dinner for the family. I made all of their favorite dishes: creamy chicken soup for Harold, rosemary roasted ribs for Claire, blueberry muffins for the kids. I spent hours in the kitchen, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they would appreciate the effort. But when I stepped out for a quick phone call, my dinner was gone. My plate, the one I had been so excited about, was completely clean, as if it had never existed. My heart sank. "Mom, you were on the phone for so long," Claire said, not meeting my eyes. "Come on, sit down and eat something." Her tone was awkward, as if she knew something was off, but didn't know how to address it. I sat back down at the table, feeling the weight of the moment. Harold was already irritated. "Who was calling you for that long?" he grumbled. "And while you're at it, pass me the cornbread." I was about to respond, but my frustration bubbled over. It was Nora, I said quietly. She was wishing me a happy birthday. She asked if I'd be interested in joining a travel group to D.C. to see the Lincoln Memorial. It's something I've always wanted to do. At the mention of Nora's name, Harold's face tightened, and Claire's eyes grew cold. They both dismissed the idea, brushing it off as something trivial. "It's a waste of money," Harold muttered. "You're too old for this." But I wasn't backing down. I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going to spend my days taking care of everyone else, sacrificing my dreams just to meet their needs. I was going to live for myself. The next morning, I packed my bags quietly. No explanations, no apologies. I was going to D.C. for 3 days, and I was going to enjoy every single moment of it. I didn't care what Harold thought or what Claire expected of me. This was my time. The trip itself was a revelation. Standing before the Lincoln Memorial, I felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not because of the trip itself, but because I had finally done something just for me. The feeling of being part of something larger, of walking among the monuments and memorials that held so much history, was overwhelming. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was truly living, not just existing to fulfill other people's needs. When I returned, things were different. Harold was angry, Claire was distant, but I didn't care. I had stepped out of the shadow of my family's expectations, and for the first time in decades, I was standing in the light. I was no longer just Harold's wife or Claire's mother. I was Iris, finally, fully, unapologetically Iris. That night, as I unpacked my suitcase, I realized that this trip had given me more than just memories. It had given me the courage to keep living for myself, to stop waiting for permission, and to make choices based on what I wanted, not what others expected of me. I didn't know where the road would take me, but for the first time in a long time, I was okay with that. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had learned that it was never too late to reclaim your life, to take the reins, and to make your own dreams come true. It wasn't until I was diagnosed with cancer that I truly understood how little I had mattered to my family. For years, I had been the glue that held everything together, the caretaker, the nurturer, the one who sacrificed her own needs for the well-being of everyone else. But when I became ill, everything changed. The attention, the care, the empathy, it all seemed to disappear. In the midst of my illness, I was more alone than I had ever been. I had always been there for my family, my husband, Roy, and I had been married for over 30 years. We had raised 2 children, built a life together, and shared a home filled with memories. But when I received that diagnosis, when the words terminal cancer were spoken to me, the world I thought I knew began to crumble. The fear, the uncertainty, the pain, it was all overwhelming. Yet, what struck me the hardest was how little my family seemed to care. Roy, my husband, was the first to distance himself. Instead of offering support, comfort, or even just a kind word, he seemed to become more distant with each passing day. His attention was elsewhere, on his work, on his hobbies, on anything but me. I remember one night as I sat on the couch, feeling a wave of sickness wash over me. I looked at him, hoping for some sign of compassion, but he didn't even glance my way. He was too busy watching TV, too focused on his own life. My children, Jake and Emily, weren't much better. Jake was in his 20s, struggling with his own issues, and Emily had just started a family of her own. They had their lives to live, their careers to build, and their own problems to deal with. I understood that, but there was a part of me that had always put them first. I had always been there for them, attending their events, cooking their meals, soothing their wounds. Now, when I needed them the most, they were nowhere to be found. I didn't expect them to drop everything and care for me around the clock, but I did expect some empathy, some kindness. Instead, I was met with silence. Roy didn't even want to talk about my illness. When I tried to discuss it, he would change the subject, or worse, dismiss my concerns with a wave of his hand. "You're going to be fine," he'd say, as if those words alone would make everything better. One day, I couldn't take it anymore. I felt like I was drowning in my own emotions, overwhelmed by the isolation I felt in my own home. The silence in the house was deafening. It felt as though I was invisible, like my illness didn't matter. That day, I packed my things, clothes, documents, and some money and left. I had never done anything like this before. I had always been the one who stayed, the one who made everything work, the one who kept the family together. But I was done. I was done being the invisible one, done being the person who was always expected to sacrifice for others. I checked into a luxury resort by the beach, a place I had always dreamed of visiting. The moment I arrived, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The air was different here, fresh, free, and alive. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. I spent the next few days doing nothing but relaxing, reflecting, and finding peace in the solitude. It was the first time in months that I had been able to focus on myself without feeling guilty or burdened by the needs of others. At the resort, I met other women who were also seeking a moment of peace in their lives. Some were dealing with illness, some with family struggles, and others with the weight of decades of emotional labor. We shared our stories, our pain, and our triumphs. It was in those conversations that I realized something profound. I wasn't alone in my feelings. So many of us, especially women, had been conditioned to put others first, to give until we were drained, and to stay silent about our own needs. But here, in this space, I was allowed to be me, just me. No roles to play, no expectations to meet, no demands to fulfill. The time I spent at the resort became a turning point for me. I came to the realization that I didn't owe anyone my sacrifice anymore. I didn't owe Roy or my children my silence or my constant care. I was worthy of love, of care, and of attention not just from others, but from myself. I had spent my whole life putting my family's needs ahead of my own, but it was time to change that. When I returned home, things were different. I no longer felt invisible. I had found my voice again, and I was no longer afraid to use it. I told Roy that I was done living my life for him or for anyone else. I had spent too many years putting everyone first, while I withered away in the background. No more. I told him I was taking control of my own life, my own happiness. He didn't like it, of course. He tried to argue, to convince me that I was overreacting, but I didn't listen. I told him I was going to sell the house, move into a smaller place, and start over. I wasn't going to stay in a marriage that had drained me, where I had been invisible and unappreciated. I was done with the years of neglect, the years of emotional abuse, and the years of pretending everything was okay. For the first time, I felt like I was truly living, not just existing, not just surviving, but living. I was going to take care of myself, to focus on my own happiness, and to put my needs above the demands of others. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was the right one. I had spent too many years living for others. Now, it was my turn to live for me. I had always believed that family was everything. For years, I had poured my heart and soul into caring for my family, my husband, my children, my grandchildren. I was the silent force behind the scenes, making sure everything was running smoothly, ensuring that everyone else's needs were met. I gave and gave, thinking it was my duty, my role as a wife, mother, and grandmother. But somewhere along the way, I lost myself when my grandson, Nathan, threw hot water on me. It was the breaking point. It wasn't just the physical pain, though that was severe enough. It was the emotional betrayal that cut deeper than anything I had ever felt before. Nathan, a child I had helped raise, who I had loved and cared for, had turned on me in an instant. I had never imagined he would hurt me in such a way, but there I was, in pain, feeling more alone than I ever had in my entire life. The situation wasn't just about the incident itself. It was about the complete lack of support from my family. They didn't defend me. They didn't step in to protect me. No one came to my aid. Nathan's parents, my daughter and son-in-law, dismissed it as just a kid being a kid. They minimized what had happened, brushed it off as if it didn't matter, as if my pain, both physical and emotional, was nothing more than an inconvenience. They didn't seem to care, not truly. I stood there, stunned, my heart sinking into my chest. For years, I had been the one to put them first. I had cared for Nathan when he was a baby. I had supported my daughter and son-in-law through every challenge, and yet here I was, treated like I was invisible. All those years of sacrifice, of putting myself aside for them, seemed to mean nothing. As I sat there, nursing my wounds, something inside me snapped. I was tired of being the one who always gave, tired of being the one who always took the back seat, tired of being the one who was expected to endure, to accept, to stay silent. It was time for a change. I couldn't keep living this way, couldn't keep allowing my family to treat me like I was invisible. I deserved more than that. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on my life, on the years I had spent caring for others and the years I had spent neglecting myself. I realized I had been allowing myself to be taken for granted, to be pushed aside while everyone else lived their lives. I had been waiting for their recognition, for their appreciation, but it had never come. It was time for me to take control, to reclaim my life, my worth, and my happiness. The next morning, I made a decision. I packed my bags and left. It wasn't just about the hot water incident. It was about everything. It was about the years of emotional neglect, the years of sacrificing my own needs, and the years of being expected to stay silent while my family walked all over me. I was done. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I didn't ask for permission. I just left. I checked into a resort far away from the chaos of my family's expectations. I needed to find peace, to rediscover myself, to remind myself of who I was before I became everyone else's caretaker. I spent the next few days focusing on me, on my needs, my desires, my happiness. I didn't have to worry about anyone else. For once, I was living for me. During my time at the resort, I met other women who had experienced similar struggles. They, too, had spent their lives caring for others, neglecting their own needs in the process. We shared our stories, our pain, and our triumphs. I realized I wasn't alone. There were so many of us women who had spent their entire lives giving, only to be forgotten, ignored, and taken for granted. But we were all in the same place, now taking control of our own lives, living for ourselves, finally putting our needs first. When I returned home, I was a different person. I had spent so many years shrinking myself to fit the mold that others had created for me. But now, I was standing tall. I was no longer the silent caretaker, the invisible figure in the background. I was someone who deserved to be seen, to be heard, to be valued, and if my family couldn't recognize that, then it was their loss, not mine. I walked into the house, and everything felt different. The weight of years of emotional neglect had been lifted. I knew I had the power to change my life, and I wasn't going to let anyone stop me. I was ready to take control of my future, to live the life I had always dreamed of. My family, of course, didn't take it well. They didn't understand why I had left, why I had finally decided to put myself first. But their confusion didn't bother me anymore. I had learned that I didn't need their approval to live a fulfilling life. I didn't need their permission to pursue my happiness. I had spent too long waiting for them to notice me, to appreciate me. Now, I was taking charge of my own life. The weeks that followed were filled with change. I started making decisions based on what I wanted, not what others expected of me. I began to travel, to explore the world, to find joy in the things I had always put aside. I found myself again. I remembered who I was before I became a caretaker, a mother, and a wife. I was me, just me. And as I continued on this journey of self-discovery, I realized that sometimes the hardest thing to do is to walk away. But in walking away, I had found the freedom I had been searching for all along. I had found the strength to stand up for myself, to reclaim my worth, and to live a life that was truly my own. After 10 years of caring for my mother-in-law, I thought I had earned some respect and recognition. But when she passed away, her children quickly swooped in and took everything she had left behind. They ignored the years of sacrifice, the love, and the devotion I had given to their mother. But I wasn't bitter. Instead, I discovered a letter she had written to me, one that had been hidden for all those years. In it, she expressed her gratitude, her acknowledgement of everything I had done for her. That letter became my turning point. It wasn't the material things that mattered, but the love and appreciation I had given and received over the years. It was a reminder that sometimes the most meaningful things we do are the ones that don't show up on the surface. Even when others don't recognize your sacrifices, you must still know your worth. In life, we often find ourselves giving and doing for others, hoping for recognition or appreciation. But sometimes, the greatest reward comes from within. The real value is not in the things we give, but in the love and intention behind them. We may not always get the recognition we deserve, but that doesn't diminish our worth. What matters is knowing that we've done our best, that we've loved with all our heart. Keep going, even when no one is watching, because in the end, you are the one who matters most. If you've ever felt unnoticed or unappreciated for your efforts, I want to hear your story. Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of hope, strength, and self-discovery. Together, we can learn to recognize our own worth.